Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
I am doing well. So far, the war hasn't grown greatly in size, but there's a lot of questions that have to be answered. There's a lot of concern around the world. There's a lot of concern in financial markets on how this is going to play out. And we want to try to answer some of these questions. I want to start off with talking a little bit about why did we feel, or our administration feel compelled to assassinate Soleimani?
Yeah.
And I would say that there are many things, many lies told, much disinformation, and yet Soleimani was, arriving in Iraq, and so there are different stories on why. Our government says he was coming to orchestrate a killing of more Americans, and they even got around to justifying this by saying, well, that's legitimate. Preemptive killing is okay because we know he's going to do it. He's killed a lot of people. So there's a lot of information floating around there. But it doesn't answer the question, why now? Why did they feel so strongly about him being assassinated? For some reason, I just don't buy into, all of a sudden they discovered that this military leader of Iran decided that he would come in a very normal diplomatic manner, arrive in a commercial flight and come into Iraq. Iraq's our friends, we created that country. They're our buddies, and walking into this trap and get assassinated. And it isn't, I just don't believe it's the fact that they really believed he came, to kill Americans. I want to put up a map and show why I don't think there's any reason why the Iranians would go out of their way to precipitate a fight with us. There it is. We've had it up before, right in the center. That's Iran. And all the flags, those are our bases. And he would decide that, come in and have a military attack and start killing more people. Well, it doesn't make any sense. But it also means that if anybody should feel threatened, it's Iran. Look at this. It's totally surrounded, and how many nukes are there, and how many submarines are sitting out in there. So the situation is designed to build up great hatred and animosity toward a leader in a country that we don't like, and for a long time we've been trying to undermine them. And they have their imperfections, but I'd have to admit that we have more of a moral responsibility to talk about our imperfections. And if we're going in the wrong way and aggravating things, we ought to try to prevent that from happening. But I think that we could go down a list. You have a list and I have a list, and we can't go over them all the lies they've been telling. But it's mainly to build up hatred in America. And unfortunately, they're very successful. Whether it's a conservative station or a liberal station, the whole effort is designed to, destroy the reputation of this man, and that we are justified. We're on the moral high ground, and I think they're closer to their homelands, defending their homelands, than we are. We're 6,000 miles away from home, and we continue to aggravate, and we've been doing it for a long time. And this is something that, unless we change policy, is going to continue. But they're very much together. The military forces are made up of United States and Saudis and Israel, and they're the ones who are most vocal about destroying the government of Iran. So there are other suggestions on why, but I want to go and dissect this out a little bit more, about just why was he assassinated.
And the thing is, it's just the same. If you somehow say this was a bad idea, we shouldn't have done it, and the things they're saying about Soleimani aren't true, then of course the reaction among a lot of people, oh, you just love this guy, you hate Americans, you want to see them killed. And it's just the same. You'd think that after 2003, after the lies in 2011 justifying the attack on Libya, and so on and so on and so on, you'd think that people would pause a little bit when they hear the exact same things being said about the bad guy of the week. They would stop a second and say, hey, maybe they're lying this time, But the claims that were made initially about the attack, they are really not holding water. They're falling apart. One of these occurred primarily, and we'll talk a little bit about the vote in the Iraqi parliament yesterday, which was very significant and interesting. But during this debate, and this has been reported in several media outlets, that the acting Prime Minister Mahdi stood up and explained that Soleimani was actually on a diplomatic mission. The Iraqis had agreed to act as intermediaries between the Saudis and the Iranians, and the Saudis had delivered a peace agreement to the Iranians, and Soleimani was going to Baghdad to give his response. And this is how the reporting goes, which makes it interesting in that the U.S. knew this was happening. So this kind of throws some cold water on the idea, and as you suggested earlier, here he is, he's coming into town to plot attacks against Americans, and he's waltzing through the airport without a care in the world. Doesn't seem to make sense. So if he was on this mission, who would be interested in derailing any kind of peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia? And I think it's probably worth speculating on that.
Yeah, I want to read two of the headlines in the news that came out. And again, this is not proof of anything, but it should make people stop and at least think. Because what if it is true? What maybe there is a balance rather than what you're hearing on the news media. People now, when you just ask them, do you trust our government? Does the government ever give us clear information when they have commissions and study problems? American people don't trust, but immediately they say, oh, yeah, they go along with the propaganda. But here's one headline: Soleimani was in Baghdad on mission for Saudi peace. You say, oh, well, that can't be true, you know. They just brush it off. But another one: Soleimani was to deliver Tehran's reply to Saudi de-escalation letter when killed. And this is what the Iraqi Prime Minister said.
Yeah, during the debate. Yeah.
So this is big if it even has an iota of truth.
Yeah.
And of course, everything in the past week or so, I can hardly believe that they can get away with blaming Iran on all this.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense to me.
And here you have Trump was in Mar-a-Lago. He was down there. I think he was surrounded with Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio, Mike Pence, and Mike Pompeo. It's hardly surprising he wanted to kill someone after having to deal with these guys all weekend. But they presented him some options. The military guys presented him some options. And there was a piece in the New York Times, which again, we take everything with a grain of salt here. But we take it with a grain of salt, suggesting that they presented him the most extreme option, which is the assassination, in hopes that he would take something less extreme because it sounded so crazy. And he said, I'll take that one. You know, this is what they reported, that he would do that one. We know that Pompeo had floated the idea of assassinating Soleimani, I think, a year ago or so. So again, this undermines the suggestion or the claim made by the administration this was a threat of an imminent attack, and we got to kill this guy because the attack's coming. First of all, I don't see how that would stop attack anyway, because it's not just one guy. It's not like he's going to run around, you know, with a bomb. And Craig Murray, who we had his article on our site, and he's a former UK ambassador in Central Asia. He makes a good point, and we can talk about this a little bit. That when when Pompeo said an imminent threat of attack, he was using a term of art that's detailed in something called the Bethlehem Doctrine of preemptive self-defense. So imminent, according to the specific legal definition of that term, according to this doctrine, doesn't mean what we think it means. It doesn't mean that there is any details. It's a concept. It means neither soon nor definitely going to happen. It's just a word that's thrown out that sounds really scary, and that seems to be the case here. You
know, and we end up with a lot of absurdities, and Pence contributed to this because Pence was explaining this, that Soleimani was responsible for 9/11. Yeah, it's totally insane. No, even the Trump people, well, he's a Trump person, but not too many people buy into that, but they just throw that out. But the other one is that when they voted to kick us out, which we never should have been there, and we ought to listen and just leave. But Trump always likes to get the bills paid. You know, if he's going to get out, if he's going to stay in United Nations or NATO, pay your bills, pay your bills. So he says, we're not going to leave until you pay us, you know, for us building you this wonderful air base, you know, and that wonderful embassy. I mean, that has to be fairly absurd, and yet it passes off as more propaganda.
Yeah, speaking of Pence, you know, he said, well, 10 of the 12 hijackers were close to Soleimani. First of all, they were 19, and 15 of them were Saudis. The Saudis were not close to Soleimani. You know, so the whole thing is cockamamie. It's the same old thing. It was the Condoleezza Rice. You know, we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud kind of thing, and a lot of people buy it. But you moved us into our second area of topic of conversation, which is really fascinating: the Iraqi parliament vote. They got together yesterday and held a vote on the expulsion of U.S. troops. Mahdi was furious. You know, the acting prime minister was furious about the assassination. Here's the 5-point action plan that was passed by the Iraqi parliament. Now, this is not technically a binding vote, because what it does is it tells the Iraqi government, parliament tells government, here's what we want you to do. Government has to agree to do it. But here are the 5 points. In the presence of all foreign troops in the country, withdraw the request for assistance from the anti-ISIS global coalition, which is the basis for us being there, ban the use of Iraqi airspace by any foreign power, and lodge an official complaint to the UN over the U.S. airstrike. So they voted unanimously, and there was some abstentions. The Kurds didn't show up, and some of the Sunni parties didn't show up, but the largest political party was there. The largest bloc was there. They voted unanimously in favor of this. So they're sending it now to the government to follow up. And as you point out, I think it's even worth reading what Trump said, because I think we have Trump's statement on it up on the screen that we can actually read what Trump said. After the Iraqi parliament voted that, hey, we want you to leave, guys, he said, speaking to reporters on Air Force One, the U.S. president said, quote, if they do ask us to leave, if we don't do it in a very friendly basis, we will charge them sanctions like they've never seen before, ever. It'll make Iranian sanctions look somewhat tame. We have a very extraordinarily expensive air base there. It costs billions of dollars to build. Long before my time, we're not leaving unless they pay us back for it. Then said, if there's any hostility, that they do anything we think is inappropriate, we're going to put sanctions on Iraq, very big sanctions on Iraq. That doesn't sound like the way you talk to an ally.
No, hardly. And, you know, sanctions, from my viewpoint, are acts of war.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's meant to destroy the middle class and undermine so that they'll turn against their government. And it always does exactly the opposite. They become more loyal to their government, and they blame us for the problem. But the sanctions thing is not ducking the issue of war. But Trump continues to threaten. He said something about we have 52 sites that we want to target, and I think he used cultural sites.
Yeah.
Well, that makes you think, well, it's not at least military. Maybe that's not going to kill as many people. Cultural means religious.
Yeah. It's insane.
So just the threat of that expresses to all the Iranians exactly what we think about their culture, you know, and the whole thing. But it's very, very unfortunate that we're moving in this direction, because it's going to be hard to reverse it. And right now, you know, the propaganda machine is really rolling in this country, because we threaten our patriotism or belief in this country by merely asking a few questions. Well, maybe there was another reason Soleimani was there, and he wasn't there to plan the next attack. But to blame, I don't think morally and militarily there should be a big debate about this, because if we would follow a principled policy seeking peace, we wouldn't be in these countries. I mean, we would be at home. So that's why I think this vote is very, very important, because otherwise we invade a country, reestablish it, we put a puppet leadership in there, and then we put a puppet leadership in there that loves Iran, and then we complain, oh, they're ganging up on us now. So it hasn't made any sense, and yet the American people saying, well, these are bad people. We got to stop them because they'll do this and that. And here they are surrounded, by us. We have them trapped. And nothing good can come from this, from our policy. I think it's time for the American people to wake up and say, it doesn't make any sense for us to be so antagonistic and so much involved in our empire. But as we have talked about this before in many other areas, the military-industrial complex has a lot of power, and we can believe that the profiteers of war are involved in the perpetuation of this process right now.
Yeah, exactly. And here's a couple of people who have written about this. Here's a real irony. Iraqi parliament votes to expel the U.S., expel the forces in this country. It's ironic because 16 years ago, we invaded Iraq. We spent a couple $trillion to bring them democracy. And now then they're exercising this democracy and voting as a parliament to ask us to leave. And now they're under threat. Now they're in big trouble. So we give them democracy. They exercise. No, hold on. We don't want you to do that with your democracy.
We have a very strong, clear position about what our organization is trying to do. It's in our title, Peace and Prosperity.
Yeah.
We believe in that. That involves the non-interventionist foreign policy. But when this story came out about Soleimani going on a peace mission, it reminded me of a tragic history, part of our history, which was a true coup, a military coup in this country, and that, of course, occurred in 1963.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you can get any more facts out to come to the conclusion that the CIA was involved in the assassination of Kennedy.
Yeah.
And the story then was that Kennedy had softened. He always leaned toward peace, but he wanted to get out of Vietnam. Yeah. He wanted to have relations with Cuba, and he wanted to talk to Khrushchev. And there were a lot of people, especially the CIA and the CIA agents who got fired, and also the military-industrial complex, because that's how they make money, is this. And for that reason, they had to commit an assassination. So in a way, if you're a leader of a country, boy, it's risky business to come out for peace.
Yeah,
and yet,
no kidding.
Yet if you take a poll and talk to the people, what do you like? Do you like war or peace? Oh yeah, we like peace unless there's a bad guy out there that we have to go and assassinate, and we have to sacrifice thousands of our own people and millions of other people because we're looking for peace. And the rationale isn't there. That's why we're starved for getting information out to the American people to explain to them that it's policy that really counts. There is such a thing as blowback.
Yeah.
When we get hit and hurt, as a matter of fact, I think this whole thing has made us much greater danger because they can't. The map shows we can't attack them militarily, but they can attack us. And this breeds the terrorist approach of bombs and drones, and there's more stuff now and that they can use. So I definitely feel less safe now because of this.
Yeah.
And they did it to make us safe.
Yeah, thanks.
And people. And the media just pounds it in that without this type of operation, we as Americans won't be safe, and yet the exact opposite is happening.
Yeah, talk about twisting language. I would do a little conclusion here by, first of all, putting up a tweet. This is what Trump said when he announced the attack. Tell me if this doesn't sound a little bit wacky. I don't know if we have that tweet available. Here's Trump. We took action last night to stop a war. We did not take action to start a war. That doesn't make any sense. You went over there and you assassinated their top general. He wasn't just a general, he was like the vice president of the country, hugely powerful. You go over and you assassinate someone like that and say, well, we did that to stop a war. It doesn't make any sense. Trump supporters should also take note that this is the danger of the president listening to neocons, listening to be surrounded by Rubio and Graham, the people who hate his guts and like to see him out of the office, people like Pompeo and Pence who are just nuts. This is the danger, and we're happy when you listen to some people that we like. We're hoping that someone like Doug McGregor would get in there as national security advisor, who would give him some actual pro-American advice. But this is the danger, and if you like Trump, you should be worried because he's given a big opening to get trounced next time around. The Dems will take advantage of it. But, you know, I can almost see some of the comments below, and we do love your comments, but there's going to be someone who says, but Ron, you know, this guy had to be taken out. He killed Americans. He attacked our base. The threat was imminent. He was tied to 9/11. And I would just answer, says who? That's what you should ask yourself. Says who? Well, the same neocons who've lied over and over and over. It doesn't mean we think this guy's a cuddly guy that we'd like to invite in the studio. We don't know. But what we do know is that they lie us into war every single time. And they're doing it again. So let's try to be a little bit more skeptical this time.
Very good. And, you know, one point I'd like to make is that this is not a single party position. It's interesting to see the Democrats coming down hard on Trump because of the hatred they have for Trump no matter what. And they're going to want to enforce the war powers resolution. And what did Obama do? He introduced the whole notion of assassinating American citizens. He had a hit list of people who had to be killed. Where were they then? This is the reason why the approach of a more independent-minded libertarian approach really can look at it and see how the Democrats do it and the Republicans do it, and they're both in collusion, especially they both vote for the military budget. You know, if they really wanted to do something, the Democrats voted to get rid of that provision that said that they couldn't spend any money on going to war against Iran. So it's all facade, it's all fake, and yet the important thing is to sort it out and what is principle and what isn't. And the principle, of course, is if you want peace and prosperity, you have a non-interventionist foreign policy and you have a very limited government. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Please come back soon.